is up, everybody? Welcome here to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm your host for today's show, Rockin Robbie Billups. I'm super excited to introduce you to this next creator we got coming on. She is a writer. She has done editing work. She's also done some lettering, and she's actually taught at the Cubert School, which I think is incredibly cool. So let's bring her in to talk about the upcoming Vampirella Summer Special amongst a myriad of other topics. We'll see where we go. Let's welcome everybody. Give a mighty, warm and hearty station to Erica Schultz. Hey,
Hello.
Erica, how you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Super excited to have you here. I am a fan of Vampirella. I am a fan of Elektra. I am a fan of the Spawn universe. So I'm a little bit familiar with your work. I'm very excited to have a conversation with you. So first thing I want to ask you, this is how I get to know anybody in our comic book realm. What got you into comics? What's your comic book origin story? When did you start reading? What was the book? What were the characters, the creators? Who sunk you into this industry?
My older brother used to always bring comics back from like Boy Scout like Boy Scout meetings, or like he would go and get something on the spinner rack from the 7-Eleven, or there was a store in our town called Rockland's that was kind of like, you know, five and dime kind of store. Like they'd sell like candy, cigarettes, comics, you know, that whole thing. And he would bring stuff home. And at the time, it was mid to late 80s. So you're thinking Claremont and Byrne, going into Claremont Lee for Uncanny X-Men, and Little Spider-Man, Batman, Death in the Family, which I think was that Michelini, maybe? I don't know.
Death in the Family?
Yeah.
Was it Starlin, I think, right? Was that Starlin?
I think it was Starlin, and I want to say, my brain is just, sorry.
Michelini was definitely doing Spider-Man for certain at the time, I think. But,
yeah. So those are, I mean, that was basically kind of the crux of it. And in terms of like who I was being influenced by. And when I started high school, I kind of pulled away from comics for a little bit. You know, I was still like watching, you know, stuff because, you know, Batman animated series was coming out, and X-Men animated series was out and such. I guess you would call it X-Men 92 now, because there's X-Men 97. So
yeah, right. Now we call it that now, right? But back then we just called it X-Men, the show, right? The cartoon.
Exactly. So when I went to college, some really good friends of mine were really into comics, and I didn't have a car on campus. So when they would make, you know, twice a month, they would make the trip to the shop to get Magic cards, and because Magic the Gathering was like huge, or like anything D&D or comics, whatever, I'd be like, hey, can I come? And such. And I love the idea of sequential storytelling, and I know that that's not a new thing, and I know that BDs have been like, and fumetti in Italy, and BDs in France, and manga and manhwa and everything. I mean, this isn't a new thing. The idea of sequential storytelling has been around forever. But to somebody like me, I always had a lot of trouble reading, and I was dyslexic, or am rather dyslexic. And so reading comics really helped me, because I can't read a novel, like to this day. Like I can't sit down and read a novel. It's like way too much. But you give me a trade paperback or a compendium, and I'll blow through it, you know, because it's like the perfect match of words and, you know, visuals that just comes together in the right balance.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have a homie who's dyslexic, right? And that's why he loves comics, because he says the same thing you did. I can't read a novel. I've tried to sit down with Lord of the Rings. I've tried to sit down with Stephen King. I've tried to do that, but I can't. But comics have always worked for me. Comics and movies, I'm super into those because it helps me. And like the comics, I feel like I'm able to read even though this is something I have to deal with, is this dyslexia. So that's something I think is very widespread amongst a lot of comic book fans. And do you think it's because it's like scripted and there's the visual element? Is that what helps there?
Honestly, I can't speak for everybody. For me personally, if I open up a novel and it's just a giant block of text, my brain looks at that giant block of text and just cannot process that at all.
You're like Bruce Wayne in that Dream episode of Batman the Animated Series, right? What was that? Perchance to Dream? Was that the name of the episode?
Which is I think that's actually part of a line from Hamlet. To sleep, perchance to dream, I think is the line from Hamlet. But if it's broken down into your balloons and you've got like 25 words and 25 words and 25 words versus this giant block that just, and also when you see it in a block like that, even if there's paragraph spaces, you see something like that in a block, it seems insurmountable. Albert Einstein was dyslexic. Who knew? I most certainly don't have Albert Einstein's IQ, but yeah.
Very few of us do.
Exactly. But that idea of like there being that huge block of text, it seems like you can't get over it. It's too much and it's overwhelming. But you can say, I can read that balloon and that balloon and that balloon. You know, because I think it is separated. I think, at least, again, this is just for me, I think that my brain can take it in these little bites a lot easier. I mean, you mentioned Lord of the Rings. When the first Lord of the Rings movie came out, my best friend for the past 35 years, she is crazy when it comes to books. Like, you can hand her one of those fat hardcover books, and in 2 days, it's cover to cover done. Me, it would take me years, but she's just like, boom. So the Lord of the Rings movies come out. She's like, oh, I'm going to read the books. All 3 books read in a week.
A week? Oh my God.
No, but that is her. That is her. She's like, she's like, zzz. So I was like, oh, I'm going to read the Lord of the Rings books. So I got it where it's each one as its own. So I figured, okay, if it's not one giant thing, it's not going to be so crazy. I can do these, you know, each as a little novel. I start reading the first one. My boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, was like, oh, I'm going to read it. So when I was sleeping, he would start reading the book. I did not finish the first book before he finished Return of the King.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He finished Return of the King, and I was still, I wasn't even on Two Towers yet. I was still on the Fellowship.
But you did finish, is what you're saying.
I did finish, but it was a slog to get there.
So you're just like, I should have just watched the movie because I get
it. Well, I mean, back in the day, we had Cliff Notes.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And I know people, you know, jump on ChatGPT to summarize things. Don't use AI, kids. It's terrible. But we had Cliff Notes, and that's basically what I would have to do is I would have to go through Cliff Notes because there was no way that I was going to be able to read the book in time for a class.
Yeah.
You know, and it was that, and high school and college was basically Cliff Notes for me.
Yeah. See, Cliff Notes was meant to be like a learning help, and
it was meant to be not in place of the novel. It was meant to be in coordination with the novel, but I did not do that. I was like, oh, I can read this pamphlet.
I hear this all the time today about kids because I'm in my 40s, right? So I graduated high school in the 90s, and so yeah, Cliff Notes. In fact, I've never actually read Animal Farm. I've only ever read the Cliff Notes like multiple times, but I love reading. So I've read tons of these books, and I was always really good. I loved book reports. I loved doing that kind of thing. Where was I going with this? But oh yeah, nowadays I can't even imagine because like my girlfriend's talking about she's got like 17-year-old son. She was talking to me the other day. She's like, oh man, they've accused him of cheating and using AI. And I was like, oh man, if I was a kid and like in the 90s, and we had everybody would have been using that in my class. They would have been like, tell me the themes of Mice and Men or whatever. At least when I was trying to cheat, I would go watch the movie, if I was trying to do it the easy way. Right. So I can't even imagine, man, what it's like in high school today if you're an English teacher and you're having to deal with like, yep, I've heard Google's AI ideas about this book already. Can you give me your own? Because that was part of the whole thing, was like giving your own ideas about something, breaking it down into like what it means to you. And that's one of the things we do here on this channel, is we do it especially with movies, but it's like, this movie has a theme. I'm sure the director and the writer had an idea, but what does it mean to you? That's more important. Have you been into movies then? Like, I know yeah.
I love movies. I love TV shows. I love comics. I love visual storytelling.
Yeah.
Just because it's easier for me to process. Like I said, I mean, it's not this giant block of text. And my husband works in film and television, and so we're probably the two worst people to ever watch a movie with, because he will turn around and he will break it down from a technical aspect, and he'll be like, they used the wrong lens on this scene, or the lighting was off, or they lingered on this for too many frames, like they should have cut faster. And I'm sitting there breaking down plot, storyline, character development, and everything. And if we go to the movies with a group of people, like the walk back from the movie theater, everybody's just like, would the two of you just please shut up? Like, we can't enjoy a film around the two of you because you're sitting there either boring us with how amazing the cinematography was or whatever, or crapping on the movie because you think that they didn't use the correct lens or whatever. We're the worst. We're absolutely the worst.
I've been accused of that too. That's funny. I remember walking with like the walk. One of my favorite things about going to a movie with a group of people is like that conversation you have out in the parking lot, for like, sometimes it can go for a couple hours if you're not careful. Right. And then I'm like, why don't we just move this over to that bar right across the street? Like we could be doing that over there, and actually just chill and not be standing out here in the cold or whatever, or the heat, but, I love that. And I remember we were watching that last Beetlejuice movie, and we walked out of it and everybody started talking about how much they loved it. And I could tell. I was like, I don't need to be engaged in this conversation because I like these people too much and I don't want them to hate me and think I'm obnoxious. And then they kept, what did you think about it, Robbie? And I'm like, we don't really need to get into it. It's fine. It's fine. And then they were like, no, they pushed me. And then I was like, all right, if you really want it, boom, boom. And I did the whole thing, and they're like, okay, maybe next time we don't ask you.
You just say, well, it was a movie.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's it was a movie. It's hard to make a movie. They did it. There's a lot of people involved in that movie. They did a lot of work. They did a lot of work that was good. Doesn't mean that, whatever. Whatever. All right. What then brought you into the creative aspect of comics? Because you've worked as a letterer, which was news to me. I didn't know that, Erica. That's really cool, because I think letterers are some of the undersung heroes of our industry. In fact, most people like me, when you're a kid, you think the letterer is the writer. you think Stan Lee lettered all of these comics or whatever, right? But lettering is very, very, it's a whole art form, right? That's why I think Aditya Bidikar, Hassan Osman El-How, these are legends to me in the modern era. Todd Klein, speaking of legends back in the day, Todd Klein,
Tom
Orzechowski, absolutely. These dudes, these people that this work is the underappreciated work of comics. So you've done lettering, you've done some writing, you've done some editing, you've done a lot of writing actually. What got you into that side of the comic book industry?
I didn't actually think that writing or working on comics was I don't know what I thought. I just, I was very naive in the sense that you went to the shop and the books were there and they just appeared like magic. I had no concept of the process. And I knew that, you had a writer, you had an artist, you had a colorist, you had a letterer, but I didn't realize the coordination in the collaboration. And I started working at a studio in New York, and we were working on a lot of things. We were doing, commercial animation, all kinds of stuff. We were also doing comics, and working there.
Are you talking about Continuity Studios right now?
Yeah.
With Neil Adams and all them, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
That's
pretty legendary, Erica, by the way.
I
just
don't
so you know.
throw the name out because I don't want people to think I'm trading on that name. But yes, I worked at Continuity. So I don't want people to think that like I'm trading on that name.
Yeah.
But yeah,
if I worked at Continuity Studios, that would be like, I'd be like, yo, what's up? I'm Robbie. I worked at Continuity Studios. I knew Neil Adams. I know Erica Schultz. Like, this is who I am. This is this easy.
I'm a little more humble than that, Robbie. I'm just kidding. But yes, I mean, I was working in Continuity, and we were doing a little bit of everything. So I got exposed to the writing part. I got exposed to the way you would tell a story in a comic book script form. I taught myself lettering because there was some books that we were working on that needed a letterer that, and I was kind of the person there that was like, Erica can figure it out. Just give her a day or two, leave her alone, stick her in a corner with a computer, give her a day or two and she'll figure it out. And that was me. And so I was doing lettering there. I mean, I had done some animation there too. But then I was like, okay, I'm now like inking, and I'm, working on backgrounds and, doing the production of the book, scanning the book in, shrinking it down, formatting pages and everything. And I learned how to do from, soup to nuts, the whole process of it. And it was an education, and I didn't realize how many, they call it like points of failure that you can have. Like if you have like a million different, positions on a timeline, any one of those can fail and scrap everything. I didn't realize how many different people there are, and how coordinating all these people and juggling the deadlines and, and everything. I had no clue about that. And it was hugely eye-opening. And once I got that down, there were a couple of mini series and maxi series that we were working on that it kind of became my job to make sure that everything got out in a specific time. So like the line artist will draw the page. That page has to get scanned in sized. That sized scanned in page then has to go to the letterer and the colorist simultaneously so they can work together. This way there's not a bottleneck. And, the letterer is working, and then when the colorist is done, the letterer has to put the letters on top of the colors and make sure that the color choices that they made don't conflict with the color palette that the colorist has created, has been directed to do, etc. And then you got to make sure that once everything works out that way, then you have to take all of these files, you have to put it in, you have to make sure that now that digital comics are a thing, you have to make sure that you have one file that you output for a digital platform. Well, I was going to say Comixology, but I don't even know if it's a thing anymore. But anyway, at the time, you have one for a platform for Comixology, and then you have a file that is similar but different that has to go to the printer and everything. And then there's another file that has to be a smaller file that has to go to the editor so the editor can look. And, I mean, they're really, it's really a crazy job to be like, to edit and coordinate and sort of project manage these things. And I have a lot of respect for people who do it, myself included. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And because I had no clue how much went into it, I never thought that this was a career path that was something that you could get into. It was like, in my mind, it was like, well, these people are probably the people who are also writing TV or also writing films, and I could never do that. So it was never something that I thought of. But once I saw the behind the scenes, yes, it's still a really complex problem, and it's all these different parts. But once I was able to sit down and look at each part and break it down, I then turned around and say, I could do this. It's that stick Erica in a corner for 2 days and she'll figure it out. And that's basically what I did. And so I had some stories that I had written, because I've always, written stories, and, whether they were like short stories or novel ideas or whatever. And I said, I've got some notebooks with stories in them that I never did anything with. Some of them were a little more fleshed out than others. Some were, just sort of like inklings. Excuse me. And so I thought, why don't I take these stories, or at least grab one, and see if I can't make it work, not as a short story, but see if I can't make it work thinking about it in terms of pacing and such for a comic. And so I did that, and it was a story called M3. And one of the other artists at the studio, Vicente Alcazar, who had worked on Moon Knight, worked on Conan, worked on Jonah Hex, like legit artist. I had written up the first issue or two as a comic script, and I gave it to him, and he read it, and he's like, let's do this. And so he did the pencils, inks, and colors, and I did the writing, the lettering, and the production of the book. And over about 3.5, 4 years, we put out 12 issues on our own.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you learned everything first.
Yeah.
Like you learned it all. And now I'm looking at your Wikipedia, and like you did design work and art and stuff on Batman Odyssey, first X-Men, and you did a lot of work with like Continuity Studios, Neil Adams, and just that's you've done every side of the comic book industry except for maybe except for line work.
For everything except I've penciled backgrounds, I've inked backgrounds, I've done digital inking, I've done traditional inking. I haven't done penciling of foreground primary characters. So I would do what you would call like spot inks, where like if there would be like a section of like the curl of Superman's hair, this section would be like just filled in completely black. So I would do that on primary figures, but I wouldn't be doing the inking on the primary figures. I wouldn't be doing the penciling on the primary figures. I would pencil and ink backgrounds.
Yeah.
And such, digitally and traditionally. But yeah,
a lot of people don't realize how much that happens. And a lot of fans are fans of manga. And like one of my favorite, I think one of the greatest comic book creators of all time is Otomo, right? Mm-hmm. Akira to me is beautiful. So many hands like worked on that project, right? Like there's no way one person can do that. And that's what I love about comics. It's like, it's a collaborative effort creatively, like a movie, but there's less hands in the kitchen.
But there's still
right? Yeah, but still a lot. Yeah, there's still a lot to do, right? That's awesome.
Because even when I wasn't working directly on the comic pages, it was pulling reference. I don't even know if this is a thing anymore, but there used to be a free Google 3D program called SketchUp. And you could create like very rudimentary, but you could create backgrounds and like buildings and such. And it really helped because it helped you could rotate it in a 3D space and it helped you keep your angles proper and such, like your perspectives and such. So, I mean, I was doing, making these little sort of SketchUp environments and things like that for like a room. If we had several scenes happening in a room, we would be creating that. And then this way, Neil would be like, okay, well, I need it from this angle. And then I would do that. And I could print that out for him and he could use that as a guide and things like that. So even if I wasn't actually drawing, I was still part of the process. And like you said, there's a lot of different hands because like, even if you're just like an assistant at a studio, you're doing things like that. You're pulling reference, you're sizing pages, you're cleaning pages up. Because when you scan pages in, you then have to like, that paper has kind of almost like an off-white color to it. You got to make sure that you bleach that out digitally and such and take the blue lines out. I mean, there's like a whole process.
Yeah. So real quick, you mentioned something about like, you got to have a file that goes to the digital, like if it's going to be for the digital file, and you got to have a file, and you got to have a file for print. That's because of how it's going to print, right?
Yeah, it's two reasons. One, because when you have a digital file going, and I keep saying Comixology, but you know what I mean. It's like saying Band-Aid versus,
or Coke. Down here in the South, we say Coke all the time. You want a Coke? Exactly. And like, you really mean you want a Mountain Dew. That's not a Coke. But
the same thing, but like saying like Kleenex versus a tissue kind of thing. So basically, when you go to print something, you have to have what's called a bleed. So all the artwork has to go past a certain line because they're going to trim it off. So the file that you're sending for the digital, for Comixology or Comics Drive-Thru or whatever, that doesn't have to have the bleed because it's just being shown the way it is. But when you're going to print, it's a different resolution when you're going to print, and it also has to have that extra bleed. So the file's just like a hair bigger.
Yeah.
So these are very rough numbers, but when you go to send a file to bleed, it's approximately 7 inches wide by 10.5 inches tall. Okay. But when it gets trimmed, like after it gets printed and trimmed, it's 6.625 by 10.1875. So that extra, 3/8 of an inch, give or take, around gets trimmed off. But when I send a file to Comixology, it is going to be that 6.625, 10.1875.
Yeah.
But the other file is going to be the 7 by 10.5.
Did y'all have to
it's going to be slightly larger?
Did y'all have to like crank down the coloring though, because or crank it up, I should say, for printing, because it would print a certain way or something like that?
Well, that comes down to, so when you have a digital file going to be read on a tablet or a phone, that's RGB, which is essentially just red, green, blue breakdown, which is the same thing that you have. I think, well, now they have RGBK for, plasma TVs and blah, 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 whatever. But simplified, it's RGB, which is a different, how would you call it? It's not a different color hue, but it's sort of like, the pixels on your computer, on your screen, on your tablet, refer to RGB in a different way than they do CMYK. CMYK is the 4-color. So you have to make sure that when you're sending a file to the printer, you have to send them the CMYK file. If you look at a CMYK file on your computer, it looks kind of dull sometimes. And then you look at the RGB and you're like, oh, everything seems brighter and more vivid. Well, that's because the RGB is meant to be seen on a screen.
Yeah.
Whereas the CMYK is meant to be seen on the paper.
Yeah, and CMYK, you're talking about the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm a super nerd about the technical aspects of comic books, so we could go on for hours. So let's switch real quick and go to Vampirella. The Vampirella Summer Special is coming out. You've done work for Dynamite before, lettering especially. I've seen, right? Have you written for them before?
Yeah, I started writing for Dynamite back in 2015. I did. I wrote one issue for Swords of Sorrow, and I co-wrote an issue for Swords of Sorrow. So I lettered the whole crossover, And then I co-wrote an issue of Cato and Masquerade with G. Willow Wilson, who just got another Eisner nomination. Congratulations, Willow.
Much deserved, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I wrote the Lady Zorro Black Sparrow issue for Swords of Sorrow. And then I had done a 5-issue Xena miniseries, and I had also done a 5-issue Charmed miniseries with them.
Oh, word. All right. See, I was too cool to get into Charmed because I was a Buffy head, and I felt like at the time there was like a line for some reason everybody was making. Like, you're either into Buffy or you're into Charmed. You have to pick one or the other. But I always hesitate to admit, I was like, I'm kind of into Charmed too. Charm's pretty cool. I thought Julian McMahon was hot as hell, dude. I really did. So I was like into him. So I thought Charmed was pretty cool. Yeah, you worked on Charm. That's awesome. That's super
You
cool.
want to know the really weird thing is that Sarah Michelle Gellar and Shannon Doherty were very, very close friends from a very young age. So I think that that's very funny that there was this sort of like, you're either one or the other, when the two of the lead actresses were just like very close friends, and to them they were just like, whatever.
And they were two shows that were kind of in the same vein, just a little bit. They were both very different shows. The same thing happened when Angel started. And then I started hearing all this stuff about like, well, Angel's the show for guys and Buffy's the show for women. And I was just like, well, I think Buffy's the better show, but I do love Angel. So like, I was just like, I like it all. I don't care, man. And in fact, I was so heartbroken when I found out that the Buffy revival did not get greenlit.
Yes,
I was
saw
just
that.
heartbroken so much. I got to do a panel a couple of years ago with Emma Caulfield and Charisma Carpenter. That was like life goals, Erica. I was just like, I was just so happy. I was just like, I'm just happy being here. Y'all just go. It's like whatever we need. Y'all just, whatever you need, I got you. You want some water? like we got you. It was super fun. So what's your history with Vampirella? Like, were you reading Vampirella before, or is this something new for you?
I don't have a history with Vampirella. That's the thing. Is like, I met Trina Robbins a few times, and she was just out of this world, incredible, amazing, just talent beyond talent. And I had read up on Vampirella when I was working on Swords of Sorrow, because that was Vampirella was part of it. And I was never like in my mind, when I first thought about Vampirella, I was like, oh, this is a TNA book, whatever. But then I started reading Nancy Collins' take on Vampirella, and I was like, whoa, this is really, really good. And the only Vampirella that I actually own in trade paperback, do I actually have it here? Yes, I do. Because I was reading up on things, is I have Nancy Collins and Patrick Birkenkotter, God Save the Queen. This is a really great story arc. It also introduces Tristan, who is the very attractive werewolf that Vampirella has a relationship with. And I think the interesting thing is that once I actually like read up and started like delving into the character, I thought it was interesting that the back and forth between Vampy and Tristan is that he was once human, and he goes out of his way to make sure that the lycanthropy does not erase his humanity. Vampirella was never human. And whether you take she was born in hell from Lilith, or the Draculon storyline, or whatever, she was never human. And because of that, he sometimes reminds her that you don't have to be human to have humanity. And that, I think, is what Nancy and Patrick really did in this book. And so I kind of wanted to go along with that. And then they told me that I wasn't going to be able to use Tristan. And I was like, damn it.
That's terrible. By the way, everybody, Nancy Collins has a very underappreciated run on Swamp Thing. Y'all should go get
Yes.
that.
Oh, yes.
The
That's another
omnibus. I
one.
think they're reprinting it actually, if it's not
I hope
already been
so.
reprinted. So yeah.
Yes. Nancy is, I think, an unsung hero in a lot of supernatural horror spaces. And anytime that I've worked with her, she has always been just incredibly kind and complimentary and just really very, because I mean, you can't not want to ask advice of someone like that when you're in a professional setting, simply because she's done novels, she's done graphic novels, she's done comics, she's done all of these things. So you sort of, you know, try and pull back and say, you know, don't ask advice because this isn't the place. But at the same time, she is so inviting, she's so lovely to talk to, that, you know, anytime you'd say like, hey, you mind if I ask you this? She's always been very, very open and such, and just, you know, really good sounding board as well. But yeah, she was lovely to work with. So for this Vampirella story, I had just seen an interesting documentary on Pompeii and Herculaneum, and I thought, I was like, all right, there's something here. And so when I was talking to the editor, Matt Idelson, we were talking about artists to work with, and I love Adriana Mello. She's not just a fabulous artist, but she's a great person, and we had never worked together on sequentials. She had done many covers for a bunch of books that I'd worked on, but we had never worked on a story together. So it was great to actually partner up on this. And she just, I mean, she could make a nun look sexy, like, you know. But the other thing is that, like, it's not just the characters looking sexy, it's the characters looking strong and looking confident. And I think that there's a very fine line that artists specifically, but also people writing characters, need to sort of walk, because it's very easy to just be like, oh, that's just TNA, I'm not going to read that, versus, oh, hey, you know, there's something more to this. There's a wit, there's a humor, there's a sort of self-effacing kind of humor to it. But also, I mean, Vampirella knows who she is, and she knows the way she's perceived. Kind of like how Red Sonja knows who she is, and she knows how she's perceived, but she still has the chainmail bikini because I forget what it was. Gail Simone was writing her, and she had said something like, you know, it's not the cold that I worry about; it's when the hot sun is on it. These things will burn you.
Yeah. I just had Rory McConville on recently, and he was he's doing the new Red Sonja book, and he was talking about Gail Simone's Red Sonja completely informed what he's doing with the character. And I just recently had Christopher Priest on again, and he's been doing this long extended run of Vampirella. He mentions a lot of the same things you just did. He's like, a lot of people have this perception of Vampirella as this TNA, like sensationalized, over sexualized, like titillating type character. But he's like, there's a lot of meat to the bone of what Vampirella really is that he's trying to do. And sometimes, yeah, I think with Vampirella, sometimes a lot of people will look at those covers and be like, oh, easily dismissible as a TNA book. But Vampirella is a great character, a great worlds, because there's many interpretations of her background and origins and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot to play with this character. And I think Christopher Priest has even been on record saying Vampirella is more feminist than people realize, right? Yeah. Because she kind of owns her own power and her own agency. So I'm like, so what was your funnel into the character of Vampirella, and what can we expect in this book?
I mean, you can expect like a crazy adventure. My funnel into the character was basically looking at, I mean, I read Christopher's work. I read, you know, some of the original stuff. And I was talking about Nancy, the work that Nancy had done. And I realized that, like you were saying, like there is something to the fact that she owns the situation. I mean, and I said to the editor, I was like, there was a redesign that was in, like, I want to say like 2016 or so. And I said, can we use the redesigned costume? Because I really am not a big fan of the dental floss. And he said, yeah, I'm not a fan of the dental floss either, but we're going to use the classic costume. And I was like, all right. So there's a joke in there about her wearing the trench coat because it's a lot less conspicuous than her normal outfit.
Yeah.
You know,
I like those redesigns because they did Deja Thoris, I think,
they
around the
did
same time,
Deja,
and Red
yes.
Sonja, right?
Yeah. So when we had worked on Swords of Sorrow, the idea was that the Dynamite Trinity, which is Deja, Sonja, and Vampy, that the three of them were going to get a redesign. And I want to say Tula Lotay was the artist doing the redesign. And I know Nicholas Scott had some input as well. And that was very, very cool. And that was, I believe, 2016, give or take.
Tula's perfect because if you want something to be sexy, but still like modern and cool, Tula's perfect, right?
Oh,
like there's nothing that's not sexy from Tula Lotay.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's amazing. So yeah, so I mean, I had looked at, like I said, I looked at the idea of, you know, being self-aware and not going meta with it, but shining a light, using Vampirella's opinions to sort of shine a light on what's considered feminine, etc. And just showing her physical strength, showing her emotional strength, but also her vulnerability. You know, you think this is a vampire who's never been human, you know, does she even have a beating heart? Well, like I was talking about in terms of like the contrast with Tristan, yeah, you don't have to be human to have humanity. And I think that's something that like Superman does. That's something that Martian Manhunter does. That's something that, you know, all of these different characters have to show you don't need to be human to have the humanity, to have the compassion, the empathy, etc.
Yeah. That's cool. That would work for like a Superman story even. There's a lot of comparison between Vampirella and Superman that I don't think a lot of people don't realize. An alien on a alien planet, like you're just somebody on an alien planet, everybody's different, you feel outcast, you feel different, feel like you're not connected. Finding that connection, that's something we all deal with, Erica, at least in my experience. A lot of people I know, like a lot of us feel like we're outsiders, that we don't belong, and part of the whole journey of life is figuring out that none of that matters. We create the family around us. Like we're more than what people expect out of us or our origins. We're more than where we came from, if that makes sense, right?
And I always say, like, you could look at it two different ways. You can either look at it and say, when you break all of us down, we're literally just atoms.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then what does it matter if if one set of atoms likes Buffy and the other likes Charmed, you know?
Yeah.
You know, we're literally just carbon atoms bouncing around inside.
The ghost of Carl Sagan just showed up and said, we're all stardust. We all love Charmed and Buffy.
Exactly. We are all stardust who loves Charmed and Buffy. Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Heck yeah. I'm very excited. There is FOC on June 1st, I believe, for the Vampirella Summer Special. So I'm encouraging everybody to check that out. I hope you don't mind, because I know that we got to wrap up real quick. But you have written extensively a little bit with one of my favorite characters at Marvel, which is Elektra. Like,
you mean Daredevil?
Well, I'm calling her by her first name. So like if I was talking about Batman, I'd say Bruce. Elektra Natchios, whether it's just her or whether it's her as Daredevil, that's one of my favorite characters in the Marvel Universe, period. I love that character. It started for me, I don't know. It's probably like I probably first saw her when like Mike Deodato, I think, did her own miniseries, like her own series in the 90s or whatever. But then when Bendis and Alex Maleev came on to do Daredevil, that's when Marvel finally started doing nice trade paperbacks of the Frank Miller run with Klaus Janson. And that run is one of my favorite runs ever. And that's when I realized how much Elektra is as a character, right? And then started realizing that everything that Bendis and Malieve were doing was just kind of like pulling from what Frank and Klaus had already done on the character. Elektra to this day is one of my favorite characters in the Marvel Pantheon. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the character? And what are your thoughts on the character, like in general, but especially when you took over the book and she was already Daredevil? And I know a lot of people, Marvel has this habit where they like to have multiple Spider-Men, multiple Wolverine, multiple Daredevils, and a lot of people like kind of fight against that. And I'm like, yo, I understand a little bit about what you're saying, but like at the same time, Sam Wilson should be Captain America. There's no reason why there can't be two. Elektra as Daredevil to me was very fascinating because I was like, there's no way Elektra is going to be really like at home with herself, not killing for a while. You know, like there's a lot of change that has to happen in that character. In fact, even Bendis had a run on that character where there was and then Rucka came on. Oh my goodness. Now I'm remembering. I think Rucka came on, changed the costume to white. Like she was on this path. I'm rambling now. What do you think about Elektra? Not me. What do you think?
So the way I wrote Elektra was I wanted to break down her history of violence and her relationship to violence. And when in the Marco Cicchetto Chip Zdarsky run, when she becomes Daredevil, I wanted to break down this idea of she takes the mantle from Matt when he is put in prison because, and he says, you can wear the costume as long as you don't kill. Now, for Elektra, killing is as simple as breathing. So I wanted her to analyze and sort of be self-reflective about her relationship to violence and to take it as a challenge, because killing is easy for her. It's a lot more difficult. It takes more skill to let someone live. And so she took that as a challenge. She took that almost as an evolution in who she is, as an assassin, as a hero, as an anti-hero, you know, however you want to frame her.
Yeah, ever since that like Fade to Black story where Daredevil put on the armored costume and she came back, right? And all that stuff, I feel like that's been her path, right? Has been trying to undo like, a lot of people don't realize like Elektra's badass. She's badass. That's all in the character. That aspect of like killing and everything that happened, that's because of the tragic events of her past and the programming of organizations like the Hand, right? So I feel like the rest of her story has been like trying to undo
manipulated
that
too. I mean, everybody, you know, Stick doesn't get a pass here. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Okay. You know, you're right. Yeah.
And you know, her first sensei doesn't get a pass. Stick doesn't get a pass. Even some of the influence that Matt has had on her, you know, there were
Matt's got a problematic relationship with women. Let's just say.
Yeah. When he was with Izzy Libre's daughter-in-law, and Matt has a very problematic. I mean, there's a lot of people in the Marvel universe, in the Marvel Comics universe, who have problematic relationships. But you know, that's a totally different podcast.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, she's questioned herself. But now that she has taken on the mantle, she is looking at not just who she is, but who she can become. And we did a little bit of that with the character of Alice, the young woman whose mother passed away during the Venom War. And then we did that when we paired up Laura Kinney with Elektra, you know, because they both have very tragic pasts and similar pasts as well. That Elektra made it a point. It was funny because Elektra, when you have like sort of the buddy cop thing, it was Elektra that came off as the goofball. because, and it's not that she is a goofball. It's that as compared to Laura, Elektra's the goofball. So that was a lot of fun to sort of play her that way and say things like, you better do what I say because I don't want to like you less than I like the other Wolverine. So that was fun to sort of to play with them on that, and to play with Elektra as the foil to another character.
Yeah.
And I did that as well in Laura Kinney, that first arc of Laura Kinney Wolverine. The whole idea was that it was sort of this buddy cop arc because we had Laura with Bucky Barnes and we had Laura with Elektra as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, real quick. You have played around in the Spawn universe already.
Yes.
You were the writer, Rat City. You are taking over Gunslinger Spawn on the next issue, if I'm correct, right?
If this is live, then next week. So
yeah.
20th, the next week, Gunslinger number 54 comes out. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Gunslinger's a great character. Todd has been writing that character since they started that number 1. And Todd's kind of doing a step back and giving a lot of people like freedom to play with his creations. What can we expect from Gunslinger Spawn? I'm very excited.
We are expanding his rogues gallery. We are also expanding his mission. We're going to see there are more, as I badly paraphrase, there are more things in heaven and hell than you can imagine, Horatio. I'm
a Hamlet fan as well. So me and you are big Hamlet fans, right? Have you seen the Ethan Hawke Hamlet? Because that one is one of my favorites. The modernized one. I
have not seen the Ethan Hawke Hamlet. The one that sticks with me mostly is the Zeffirelli with Glenn Close and with Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson,
he's extremely problematic, and I admit that. I'm sure he was problematic when he was doing the film as well. But the Zeffirelli directed Hamlet with Glenn Close as the Queen, I thought was very, very well done. And Helena Bonham Carter was Ophelia.
That's right. I forgot about that. Oh my goodness. Because I really love the Kenneth Branagh one.
The Kenneth Branagh one is very good too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love you. I'm just saying, Erica, if you should watch the Ethan Hawke one. Kyle MacLachlan is the uncle.
I will put it on my list. There's a whole list of movies that my husband hasn't seen yet that either one of us have seen that we want to put down. So.
I loved it. Like Liev Schreiber's in it. Julia Stiles, Bill Murray. Like it came after on the heels that I guess who was it? Berman that did the Romeo and Juliet or whatever, and they did the modernized.
Baz Luhrmann, yeah.
Yeah. So everybody was like, that was the idea. Like, what if we modernize all the Shakespeare stuff, right? Which that's cool because it can be modernized. But yeah.
Well, Ethan, what's his face did Joss Whedon did
the Midsummer's Night, right?
Midsummer's Night, yeah. Joss Whedon did a modern Midsummer's Night Dream, yeah.
Yeah, and they work, man. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil is one that always kind of go. I don't. It's not really connected to Shakespeare, I guess.
No, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil was a crime book that came out from a journalist, and then they made it into a film.
Yeah, for some reason, I always equate that with Shakespeare. For some reason, I think it's the Midsummer's Night Dream and then Midnight Garden and the Good. It sounds like a Shakespeare title.
It does. At the same time, I do believe that there is something Shakespearean about the tragedy of the love story.
Yeah.
In that as well. So I mean, there is something Shakespearean about it. So.
All right. So we got the Vampirella Summer Special. It's on the way. June 1st is the FOC. Your work on Daredevil is already out. Your work on Wolverine is already out. Everybody should go check that stuff out. You got more coming, including Gunslinger Spawn, new direction, starting on this upcoming new comic book day. That's exciting. Anything else on the horizon that you want to talk about?
I will be at the end of this month. I will be at Fan Expo in Denver. So if you're at the Fan Expo convention in Denver, I will be there. And Vampirella versus Witchblade is a one-shot that is coming out either August or September.
Oh, Nice. Vampirella versus Witchblade. Well, I
Yeah.
hope we have you back on the channel to talk about that one because there's a lot to unpack there as well.
Definitely,
Erica,
yeah.
thank you so much. Where can people find you on socials if they want to follow you?
I am on Blue Sky at Erica Schultz 42, and I am on Instagram at Erica Schultz Writes, WRITES, and my website's ericaschultzwrites.com.
Awesome. Erica, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. You out there, thank you so much for watching. We're dipping out. Station, pop, pop, boom.
Peace.